I watched my best friend get blown up right in front of me. There was an IED. He tripped it. I remember the taste of the air. I remember the smell of the air. I remember what he looked like laying on the ground. The scenery, I can close my eyes and vividly remember it. Every bit of that situation terrorized me for 10 years and could be a reason that I drank so much, to escape that thought and that feeling of despair and hopelessness and helplessness, right? Not for me, for him. He was helpless. He was hopeless. He ended up passing away half an hour after the incident happened, and there was nothing that we could do to save him. And that was part of the survivor's guilt that I had, was, why did I survive and he had to die?
All right, what's up, everybody? That was tonight's guest, PTSD survivor, addiction survivor, and host of the Recover Out Loud podcast, Sean Young. My name is Dan. This is Hard Knocks Talks. We've got Sean here in the virtual studio. What's up, Sean?
What's up, man?
How are you doing tonight?
I'm fantastic. Can't complain. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we jump in?
If you're not ready to hear a hard-hitting story, then turn it off.
All right, man. Well, without further ado.
This is Hard Knocks Talks.
Okay, if you're struggling with the substance use of a loved one or have tragically lost a loved one to drug-related harms, reach out to Stronger Together Canada, peer-led support groups by Mums Stop the Harm, and or Nar-Anon groups of Saskatchewan. If you are in search of a private inpatient addictions treatment, check out Prairie Sky Recovery Centre, located in Leipzig, Saskatchewan. I didn't make it through. To make contact or learn more about today's sponsors, check out our new merch, or if you want to show us some love and buy us a coffee, all of those links are in the show notes below. So, we've learned, you're a veteran. Tell us a little bit about that. You were infantry?
No, so I was what is called a forward observer. I was in the field artillery, tasked down to the infantry and the cavalry. I was in combat arms, and so I spent quite a bit of time with both the infantry and the cavalry and field artillery. We were the redheaded stepchildren of the combat arms.
Mm-hmm. So tell us how this all got started then. Was this something that you, like, as far as your drinking went or your using went, was this something that you grew up around, or did you find your way into it some other way?
A little bit of both. So I made a promise to myself when I was a kid because I had seen what happened around my dad and my mom and the lack of involvement in my life that they had. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, I'm never going to drink, I'm never going to do drugs, and I'm never going to smoke. And my first weekend in the active duty army, I broke every single one of them except for one. I watched my dad drink all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there was many nights that he would go out and he would get completely shit-faced and drive us home. And obviously, drinking and driving is terrible, but it happened and it never
Mm-hmm.
stopped him. And we would get home and sit in the garage. And I didn't really think too much of it because I was too young or really young at the time. And I couldn't understand what he was doing. And I don't know if this is actually his goal, but he would shut the garage doors, keep the car running with the door to the garage shut, with the windows open, and we would listen to any form of heavy metal, whether it's Slipknot, whether it was anything older, Metallica, and he would just keep the engine running. And I never fully understood it until I was in the army and I realized like he may have been trying to kill us.
Wow.
And there was a lot of trauma surrounding my dad when he was drinking. I've worked past a lot of that, but there was a lot that happened in that time frame. He was a truck driver, so he was gone most of the time, but when he would come home, it would be for the weekend. So he'd get home Friday night and he would be gone um, Sunday evening, maybe Monday morning.
Mm-hmm.
And from the moment that I would set eyes on him after school to the moment that I would leave for school on Monday morning, he would be drinking consistently. So it was something that I seen all the time. My
Mm-hmm.
mom really wasn't around, but the stories that I heard about my mom were pretty terrible.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was a part of my life from the age from pretty much birth until I hit about 10 or 11, and my mom and my dad, when they were together, lost custody of my sister and I because of abuse in the household. And so the stories that I heard were that my mom was an addict, my mom was an alcoholic, she was abusive, but I didn't really hear anything bad about my dad until I actually moved in with him from my
Mm-hmm.
grandparents' house. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where I started seeing a lot of the addictive behaviors, a lot of the active addictions, some of the harder things. I didn't know about everything my dad was doing. I found out later on what he was doing, and it was really, really rough and hard to comprehend because it was happening right behind my back and I didn't see it. My
So,
mom, on the
hang
other
on a sec.
hand,
How old
go
were
ahead.
you when you moved? How old were you when you moved in with your dad then?
I was 11 years old when I moved
Okay.
in with my dad.
And was that around the
And
time? Was that around the time that you'd made this promise to yourself about not drinking?
shortly after, I would say about the age of 12 or 13,
Mm.
I made that promise to myself that, hey, I'm never going to drink, do drugs, or drink alcohol. And I did that. That was something I was really, really confident in that I believed in when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more that things started to happen, there was a lot of trauma that surrounded my relationship with my dad,
Mm-hmm.
not just physical stuff, but a lot of mental and emotional mind games, a lot of and emotional abuse, a lot of physical abuse. And it got so bad to the point where I started looking to find where I fit in because I didn't fit in at home. I didn't fit in anywhere. And so I would go and I found the marching band and I get a lot of jokes from when I was in high school. Hey, that one time in band camp, and I'm like, yeah,
Oh yeah.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked to find where I fit in, and I just didn't really fit in anywhere. And the final straw that my dad had, something happened when I was 16, about to turn 17, and he kicked me out of the house. He had chased me around the neighborhood with a phone book, beat the shit out of me, and then kicked me out. And so I moved back down with my grandparents to Sharpsburg, Maryland. And I started to find religion and I started to find places where I fit in. I started working. I had like a sense of purpose, but my dad still had this like grasp on me and this grip on me where he said, hey, you're going to live your life according to the way that I dictate it. And if you don't, then I'm going to excommunicate you from the family. When I joined the army, it was because he drove me to a recruiting station and said, you're going to sign a contract today or you're out of the family. I'd already lost so much
Mm-hmm.
in that time frame. I didn't have a relationship with a mother or a father figure. I didn't have much of a relationship with siblings because that had been taken from me. And so everything that I had in my life was taken from me, and I didn't want to have that be another option where my family that I had left that said that they loved and cared about me was taken away from
Mm-hmm.
me. So I signed a contract to join the army. And when I joined the army, that first weekend, like I said, is where I feel I became addicted to alcohol.
So, were you? Did you go into active service right away?
Yes, yes, I did.
Can I
Well,
ask a quick
I
question?
not necessarily.
Hang-
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm just wondering, was your dad an ex military man or something? Like, was this part of something in the family? Like, why was he so insistent that you go down that path?
He said I needed structure, and no, he was not a prior service. My grandfather was a Marine in Vietnam, and my
Mhm.
great grandfather was a Cav Scout in World War II. And so he held my great grandfather to high esteem. And anytime that the military was mentioned, he always brought my great grandfather up. So I always felt like I had this measuring stick to live up to with my great grandfather,
Mhm.
even though my dad never really said like you have this. Like I felt that that was the measuring stick that I had to live up to.
Mhm.
And so my dad just kind of was like, hey dude, you only have one option. It's the
Mhm.
military, either the Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, what have you. It's something.
Yeah.
And the reason that I chose the Army was actually kind of childish, but
What was it?
I went into the recruiting station, and the only two offices that were open were the Navy and the Army. And when I got to the Navy office, the petty officer that was there, chief petty officer, whatever they're called, looked at me and he said, "Let's see if you're smart enough to join the Navy." And I said, "I don't want to be a part of that. If you're going to ask me if I'm smart enough to join your organization." And I turned around, the Army was right there and said, "What do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "I don't know. Let's find out."
I don't
And
think that's
so
childish. Childish
I
to
thought
you?
it was childish because I kind of played games with a recruiter, you know?
I mean, that sounds smart to me. You had this
That's what I
insight.
thought. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you get my thumbs up.
Yeah.
Good job. Yeah. So, okay, so you say that you found alcohol like exactly the same time you joined the army. So, tell us about that. I mean, you saw all of these things and had all of these experiences with your family and your dad and your mom, and now suddenly you're in the military and like right away you're into the bottle. Like, what was that first drink like? Was there any like inhibition at all, or was like what changed?
It it felt freeing. That first that first hit, and I remember so clearly. I got this big ass bottle of Grey Goose because I didn't know what to drink. I was never introduced to drinking at a young age. Well, I mean, I was introduced to drinking, but I didn't know the taste. So my first drink was Grey Goose, and
Hmm.
from the
Hardcore.
very first sip, oh yeah, no
Yeah.
chaser, nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just grabbed it and turned it up, and that first sip felt so freeing.
Hmm.
I was like, I validated everything in my brain that I felt was wrong with me. I
Yeah.
was an outcast. I'm no longer an outcast because this is giving me the courage to not be an outcast, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I felt so validated and like I fit in because I'm drinking with the big boys now.
Yeah. Well, what I mean though is like, with with all of these thoughts in your head and the promise you made to yourself when you're younger, what like motivated you to actually pick up the bottle? Like not, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
what
I wanted to
happened?
fit in.
Okay.
I wanted to fit in. My that first weekend, I was stationed in Italy at the time, and so everybody that I knew that I was doing and processing with, they were all going out and drinking.
Mm.
I'm an 18-year-old kid. I don't know any better,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't blame anybody for me picking up. You know, I blame myself. But I think that the thing that really got me started was I want to fit in and I want to know what this feels like because I've never experienced it. And from that moment, like I said, that first sip, it was off to the races. And
Mm-hmm.
every time I share my story, I say from that very first sip, I feel like I was addicted because I couldn't stop.
Mm.
And that first night was proof, and every night afterwards was proof enough to me that I could not stop. I had the inability to stop. A lot of
Mm.
people have a thought, and a lot of people that don't suffer from addiction or don't know people that have suffered from addiction, which is hard to fathom now, that they believe that you can just stop. Well, it's not that easy. You
No.
just can't stop, right? Like you can stop because you have obligations like deployment. I can't drink on deployment, so I have to stop. I'm unwillingly sober. But that
Mm-hmm.
moment that I get back, it's back to the races. It's we're going gung ho, and I don't care what the problem is. I don't care that I've created chaos and havoc
Mm-hmm.
because I'm getting what I want and what I feel like I deserve.
Mm. So did you see action on your first tour?
Yep, yep. My first deployment was for the first 6 months it was to Jalalabad, and Jalalabad is like a massive airfield. They have helicopters there and stuff like that. And I didn't really see a lot of action or any action. I seen a lot of it through camera. And the last 9 months of my deployment, that was a 15-month deployment. The last 9 months of that deployment, I was in the Korengal Valley in Afghanistan. There's two documentaries that are made from it, Korengal and Restrepo, and it is about that deployment for my unit. And it was very contentious, but I was 18 years old, 19 years old. I didn't care if I lived or died. There were a lot of things that I did on that deployment that I shouldn't have done that put my life at risk, put other people's life at risk, but I didn't care. I didn't have anybody to live for, man. Like I didn't have family. My dad wasn't talking to me. My mom wasn't around at that time.
Mm-hmm.
My grandparents, I wasn't talking to them. My sister and I didn't have a great relationship. I didn't really have anybody to live for, so I was like, fuck it.
Mm-hmm. So was this a conscious thing in your mind? Like, was there a part of you that was trying to get taken out?
There was a part of me that didn't want to live.
Mm-hmm.
And that 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 carried with me for a very long time. I didn't want to live, right? I didn't enjoy living. I didn't have the passion for life because I felt like there was no passion in life whatsoever. I couldn't find where I fit in. I felt like I didn't fit in anywhere. So I just didn't want to live. And I guess it took me a few years to actually realize that I didn't want to be alive, and I put a lot of my own personal value in other people and other
Mm-hmm.
people's opinions of me versus how I felt about myself.
Mm-hmm.
If people loved me, I felt like, hey, I have something worth living for.
Mm-hmm.
But if people weren't surrounded in my life and didn't engage with me, I didn't feel a purpose in life.
Mm-hmm. So you spent time stateside between deployments, correct?
Yes, yes.
Tell us about what it was like coming back from that first tour.
So that I went from Afghanistan back to Italy because that was my duty station, and it 30 minutes off the plane, I was back drinking, and
Mm-hmm.
I shit you not, there was no recuperation time. There was no, hey, I get time to relax. It was, I have things to do. I have alcohol to drink, and I have a bar to drink out, knowing full well that I'm never going to be able to drink that bar out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just madness. It continued a cycle that I never broke when I left for deployment. And then I went home for 30 days on post deployment leave, and it was more madness. And I did damage to friendships, and I did damage to people that didn't deserve my chaos and my rage.
Mm-hmm.
And what I started to realize was like I was losing patience with people. I was losing respect for society. I was slowly losing respect for myself and losing respect for some of the closest people that were to me. I didn't see anybody worth value. I didn't see anybody worth my time or my energy because I felt like they didn't give me the time or the energy. So why should I give them the time or the energy? And it was a
Mm-hmm.
very selfish way to think.
Mm-hmm. Now, we spoke last week. There were some suicide attempts. Um,
Yeah.
when did those start happening?
I had suicidal ideations when I was a kid, and
Like
they
before any of
started
this?
small. Oh yeah, oh
Okay.
yeah. Because I had to live with my dad, and because I didn't feel
Yeah.
like I fit in, I wanted to end it, right? I just didn't have like I look at it now and I say like I was quote unquote smarter than that, but I know that's not the right terminology.
Mm-hmm.
I would do things to physically hurt myself so that I felt something, right? Because the depression was so deep, I didn't really feel a lot. I felt hurt, I felt pain, but I didn't feel anything that made me feel alive, and blood made me feel alive. Seeing
Mm-hmm.
my own blood made me feel alive. So I would, yeah, I took a knife and I cut my fingertips, and I have the scars from them on my fingertips. And some of the actions that I took when I was in the army of not getting behind cover, not concealing myself, leaving myself exposed. I'm not going to say that's a suicide attempt, but that was just not wanting to be alive. And then the one that really did me in, where I said I want to be alive, on the back end of it, was in 2018, and that was a combination of a relapse and a failed marriage, a second failed marriage, a
Mm-hmm.
I was losing my career in the army because I was being medically separated, and I didn't feel a sense of purpose. And I told myself, and I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, "You are no longer a human being."
Hang on one sec. What do you mean medically separated? What does that mean?
So the army looks at you, or the military in general looks at you, if you have suffered an injury that has to be continuously worked on, and you cannot fulfill your duties as a soldier or a service member at that point. They look at that and they say, okay, you're best served out of the military.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot continue to use you in any capacity. So, lack of better term, sorry, get the fuck out. And that really hurt, right? Because like I dedicated 12 and a half years of my life, my adulthood, what I've known from the moment I turned 18 to the moment that I was getting separated was Army, 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 nothing more. I didn't have any skills or any trades when I was getting out. I literally was, I felt like I was thrown to the wolves, and I didn't have this understanding of trust and anything like that, and it really hurt. And so I was being medically separated for traumatic brain injury, which is like really fancy terminology for concussions, a lot of them. And I'd suffered a lot of concussions, and I thought that, hey, this is the way that life is. These symptoms that I'm going through are how every single person deals with their problems. Everybody goes through this, right? Everybody has
Mm-hmm.
memory problems because I'm a paratrooper. I jump out of airplanes. I've been deployed 4 times to Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
This is common. This is very common, but my symptoms were very uncommon. I mean, looking back now, I'm nobody special, and I can say that I'm nobody special. But my symptoms were very relative to me, and they were very bad for me. I had a lot
Mm-hmm.
of memory issues. I had stuttering issues. I had a lot of problems with retaining information and regurgitating that information. I had a lot of headaches. My cerebellum shrunk as an adult, and
Mm-hmm.
it my life was systematically being destroyed on top of everything else that
Mm-hmm.
I was going through.
So,
So throughout this, I assume this happened over a period of time, like, and the military must have been aware. Was there any supports in any capacity given?
Not really. My chain of command, when I first came to them and I said I had a problem because some medical doctor said, you have some problems. I left it up to the medical professionals to make that determination. I took it to my chain of command. And my first line chain of command was supportive, and even at the company level was supportive, but much higher than that, they weren't. When you get injured in the line of duty or you get injured doing your job, it doesn't matter because there's a stigma that's attached to it. And that stigma is if it's broke, get it fixed. But if you get it fixed, you're a bitch. And that really hurt, right? And look, and that's not just me. It's every service member that has gotten injured since the beginning of time. And I've heard it so many times from vets. I've heard it so many times from active duty service members that are still serving that that is the stigma that's perpetrated. And so looking back at him, I thought I sacrificed my essentially my brain and my physical health to be called a bitch. And it, it took a real big toll on me.
mm.
And
So,
so I just follow up question to that, like, surely they would have known the trajectory that you were on. Do you feel like they could have not only provided some supports, but also maybe started to set you up to be successful outside of active duty?
They could have, but they put it on the responsibility of the individual.
mm,
And there's so much that they do. And I'm grateful for the military. I'm grateful for the Army. I'm grateful for what they did for me. They teach you skills to interview. They teach you skills to write a resume, but they don't teach you the life skills of getting out and acquiring a job or applying for a job. They don't teach you the skills of paying bills. I mean, naturally, any regular civilian be like, I've had to pay bills since the age of 18
mm-hmm.
on my own, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those aren't skills that we're taught. And so we're quite literally taught to move, communicate, and kill, right? And
And
that's
then they just cut you loose.
they cut you loose. They drop you loose. They say, hey, good luck.
Yeah, like so it's interesting to me that they don't teach you any skills on how to cope with all of the trauma that you've incurred during your time in service, because like obviously that's quite significant, you know.
It really is. They
Yeah.
so there's a lot of medical services available, but they don't take you seriously. And they don't take you seriously for a reason. And I encountered that. And it set me up and pissed me right off. I went in after they told me, hey, you've got PTSD, or sorry, you've got traumatic brain injury. And the medical doctors were like all up in arms and they were like all going crazy and shit like that. And my next appointment that I went in, my primary care looked at me and said, eh, you've dealt with this for this extended period of time. I think you'll be okay. And I said, what? What? Are you serious? And it enraged me because I now had this sense of urgency to take care of myself because there is something wrong, and it's not just affecting my work, it's affecting my home life. It's affecting my, my career. It's affecting me where I cannot operate as a human being at
Mm.
the base level, a human being. And you're telling me that I've dealt with this so long, I can deal with it. No, I'm not okay
Mm-hmm.
with that. And I lost it on the doctor. And I said, who are you to tell me that? Like, and that's like one of the very first times I stood up for myself as an
Mm-hmm.
individual, is saying,
Mm-hmm.
who are you to tell me that I'm not important enough to take care?
Mm-hmm.
And from that point forward, they took me seriously.
So tell us before we get too far ahead here. Now you spoke a little bit about it in the intro. You lost a friend in active service, uh,
Mhm.
and I'm so sorry for your loss and that you experienced that. That's it's horrific.
Thank you.
But tell us a little bit about the aftermath of that. That you had that
Oh.
experience. What did the next day look like? What did the next week look like?
Well, so we were on a 7 day mission. We were on a week long mission. So we didn't really have the time to grieve. And we didn't actually hear about him passing because we had passed him off to a Black Hawk, and they took him they took him to an airfield where he would be operated on, but he passed on the airplane. And so nobody really knew. And we were waiting on that information, like, hey, what happened to Nick? Is he okay? And he never made it. He didn't even make it to the airfield. And it
Mm-hmm.
destroyed us, but we didn't have the time to grieve or to mourn because we're on this week long mission. We're in the middle of Afghanistan. We're not even at our base.
Mm-hmm.
We are living quite literally in a hut surrounded by and so we had to continue mission, and we continued mission. We had a ceremony for him about 2 or 3 weeks later, and I spoke at the ceremony, and that was really hard for me, but it was what ended up happening much later on is what had a pretty lasting effect on me.
Mm-hmm.
Afghanistan, like you don't have the time to process, you don't have the time to really let those emotions out. And so when I was at home, I didn't have the opportunity to either because I had a brand new baby at home, and I had to dedicate my time and my energy to her and dedicate my time and my energy to my at the time wife. And so I didn't have the time to decompress, and I didn't have that time to let go and let God, essentially, or whatever
Mm-hmm.
you want to call him. What I had the opportunity for was to pack that in a box and let it fester and let it grow and let this monster that I had backed away just sit there and stew. And I had these pictures of Nick or everybody that we had lost in Afghanistan that I had personally known. I plastered them on my wall because I thought, like, that is a way where I can deal with this on my own, and I don't have to talk to a doctor. I just see him every day. I can see Nick on the wall every day. If I feel so inclined to, I can tap his picture and it'll be all right. But really, what it did was made me numb. And it made me numb. Did it make me numb? I
Mm-hmm.
packed his pictures away when I moved, and I didn't necessarily unpack them. I just left them in a box.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was going through some of the boxes, I opened it up, and it was just like that band-aid got ripped right off. And that happened every single time. I couldn't get past the trauma. I could not get past what happened to Nick. I couldn't get past a 19-year-old kid losing his life in Afghanistan for what? And it ripped me to shreds. And there was a lot of guilt that was surrounding it. There was a lot of guilt because I couldn't tell him I loved him before we went on mission because I was selfish and I was prideful and I
Mm-hmm.
was being a prick. And when he passed, I didn't have that opportunity to say, I'm sorry. This was on me. I did this. And so that haunted me for like 10 years. And it wasn't until I got into recovery and I had this epiphany, like one of the major things in my life that is my problem that I have to face is Nick. I have to look at the situation that happened and I have to be willing to cross that bridge.
Mm. So tell us, you started telling us about a suicide attempt that sent your life on a new trajectory. Tell us about that
Yeah,
experience. Was that what brought you into recovery?
absolutely not. It should have, but it didn't.
Mm.
And so it was June 2018. May 2018, I was in a relapse, a month-long relapse. I had not drank for a few years prior to that, and I got to this point where a relationship was ending, my health was going sour. My daughter had a stepdad that was great. I still talk to that guy to this day, and he's an amazing human being. I have nothing wrong with him. But I had nothing going for me, man. I was losing everything that I ever knew, and I was so afraid of the unknown and afraid of what was going to happen next. And I went out on this bonfire. I had bought enough liquor to supply probably my whole unit plus. And we had this bonfire going. And before I went out there, I said, I'm gonna fucking end it. That's it. I'm done. And I made 32 phone calls that night. And I said, if one person picks up, I will not go forward with it. But I manipulated myself. And I called 32 people that were in a way different time zone than I was that I knew wouldn't pick up because they were sleeping.
Mm.
And so I validated in my own brain, like, nobody gives a shit about you. Nobody cares. All these people that said that they cared about you don't give a fuck. And I manipulated myself into drinking a whole lot. I drank about 5 bottles within a
Oh.
span of time where I knew I was going to be coherent enough to carry my plan out. Got behind the wheel of my vehicle and I drove my truck into a tree at 70 miles an hour. And the engine was that far away from me. And when my face hit the steering wheel, I thought I was done. Like I was like, it's over. My plan was very simple, and I knew how much liquor I had to drink to put me to sleep. I knew what it would do to me in the interim, and the fact that I wouldn't be able to wake up was great. And I came to a few times. I came to as the cops were opening up the door,
Mm.
and I came to when I was in the ambulance, and I woke up in the hospital on Joint Base Elmendorf Richardson in Alaska. And I woke up, and most people that have an attempt are like, "I'm happy to be alive," and I fucking wasn't. I didn't want to
Mm.
be alive. I didn't want to be alive. I looked next to me, and my soon-to-be ex-wife was there, and she said, "You're stupid. You're dumb. You should never have done this." And then my first line supervisor came in, and he said, "You're dumb. You're stupid. Why did you do this?" And I told him I just didn't want to be alive, that life sucked. And there was nothing worth living for. And that those words of "you're dumb and you're stupid" made me not want to be alive. I
Mm.
had no value. I had no self-worth at that point. And I ended up getting released from the hospital. My face was all fucked up. I had a swollen eye, had lacerations over this eyebrow, but nothing really bad. Nothing that was life altering.
Mm.
And I went home and I sat in the shower and I didn't want to be alive. And I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew like if somebody didn't show up, I was going to die. I was going to make sure I finished it. And I got a knock on my door, and the person that showed up to the door was a guy that worked for me. And he said, "I am terrified to see what happens next for you, but I'm not going to give you the chance to make another attempt. You're coming with me." And him and I went to his house. He fed me and he let me sleep at his house. And he said, "I'm going to stay here with you until you're okay." And that next day, the next morning, I realized I needed help because there was nothing normal about not wanting to be alive. There's nothing normal about surviving a suicide attempt and saying, "I'm okay." And
Mm.
I checked myself into the mental health facility, and it's just like you would think. In my case, it was white everything, white shoes, no laces, white jumpsuit. I mean, not jumpsuit, like I wasn't a prisoner,
Yeah.
but white everything, white walls, white bed. I went to classes for 11 days, and it was the 11 days that I needed to help save my life to realize that life was worth living. I just had to find out what it was worth.
Mm.
and what it was worth to me.
So this was useful for you then.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it
is
was
that when
useful for
you
me.
that's when you got sober?
No.
Fuck, man.
See, here's the thing. I'm hard headed.
Oh, I'm not
I'm
trying
very,
to look down on you, man. It took me a pile of tries too. Like you're in good company here, man.
but I stayed sober. I wasn't willingly sober. Like I
Okay.
was doing it for other people, right? Anytime I got sober, I always did it for somebody else because I got that
Mm.
ultimatum. Like, if you don't get sober, I'm gonna leave, and I don't want to fucking deal with loss. Like, who wants to deal with somebody leaving them?
Yeah, of course.
Not me.
Yeah.
And so my motivation at that time was my daughter needs her dad alive,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna stay sober for her. But I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't in any 12-step programs. I wasn't going to counseling.
Just white knuckling.
Everything that, yeah, why just white knuckling it? I hated everybody and I hated myself more.
Mm-hmm.
And I got medically retired from the army and I changed substances, man. I went from drinking to
Oh.
smoking a shitload of weed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. I woke up and I'd smoke. And then I didn't have a job, so I didn't have anybody to be accountable for. I could be accountable for myself because I had nothing to be accountable for. So I
Mm-hmm.
just get high as shit all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I applied to all these jobs because I needed to have a sense of worth. And so I started applying to all these jobs that I never knew that I knew I would never get a call back for. And then I justified like my self-worth to see nobody really wants me. Nobody gives a
Mm-hmm.
shit about that. And I ended up getting an interview with an air cargo company at the airport. And I was like, yes, I'm gonna nail this. And I went in and I thought I bombed it. And I got a call back and said, hey, you got the job. And I was like, yeah. And I felt like just this sense of pride, like I can do something outside of the military and be successful. And I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't find out later on, or I wouldn't find out until later on that the only reason that they hired me was because I made them laugh. I had no qualifications for the job. I wasn't, I had no certifications to make me stand out from anybody, but I made the manager laugh. And so that really kicked me in the gut, right? Like I'm just a joke to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I self-sabotaged a lot. I wasn't grateful for the fact that I had a job and I was making money. I was so more focused on the fact that I only got hired because I made you laugh. And because I had this job at the air cargo company, I couldn't smoke. So therefore I was like, I'm just white knuckling it again, right? And
Mm-hmm.
July 4th, 2019, I had my last relapse. I had my last lie that I fed myself that I'm okay to drink. I was in a brand new relationship with a woman that I felt I cared about, and we got married, and so I'm like everything in my life is different, and I don't necessarily think that I'm going to be as bad as I was before. And so I told her, I said, hey, I'm going to have one drink. And one drink led to five that night. And the next night it was one drink led to five. And then it just continued and it perpetuated and it made my life a living hell. I was back to all the symptoms that I suffered from PTSD came back. All the symptoms that I suffered from traumatic brain injury came back. And they came back in full force, harder than before. And not just that, the behavior that surrounded what I was doing was absolutely atrocious, right? And we always talk about that the behavior is the problem that surrounds the addiction. And
Mm-hmm.
that to me was the epitome of the behavior was the problem. My behavior surrounding my addiction was the problem. I would pass this gas station every single day and they sold liquor. I'd go inside and I'd buy a bottle and I'd go home and I'd crack the bottle. And what led me into recovery was me going and get two bottles because it was Christmas time.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was a Friday. It was December 7th, 2019. And I was at the end of this binge. And I went past the gas station. It was like every other day. And I went inside, grabbed two bottles of Hennessy, and I got home. And before I even got out of the car, I cracked the first bottle and I was down in it. And I got inside and I don't even remember how long I was there or coherent for. But I woke up sometime later in the night outside, like not waking up, like falling asleep, like coming to.
Mm-hmm.
And I was outside in December without a shirt on, and I was just fucking angry, dude. Like I was rage monkey. And I was trying to figure out all these things, like piece it together. And I walked inside, and my house is a disaster. All these things that I collected over time, all the Funko Pops that I had, all these like collectibles that I had over time were shattered. There was holes in the wall, and my guitar was shattered on the ground. And I looked down the hallway, and my at the time wife was on the floor. And I didn't know what the fuck happened, but I knew that I was angry, and I didn't want to stick around to find out what happened. So I left. And the next day, I called her and I said, I don't know what happened. And she said, you hit me. And I said, I don't remember that. But she never lied to me. She never gave me a reason to doubt what she was saying. So I called the Anchorage Police Department. I said, look, this is what I did, and I need to go to jail. I fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember it, but alcohol was involved. And so I went and I met them at a Walmart, and classy, I got arrested at a Walmart, dude, in the back of a Walmart parking lot. I handed myself over, and I ended up spending 20 days in jail. And that 20 days in jail was so long, dude. I spent 20 days in jail through Christmas, and I just wanted to be surrounded by my family. But I was still blaming everybody for my problems. I said my dad is the reason that I'm an alcoholic because he's an alcoholic and genetically he passed it down to me. My mom's the problem because she did the same thing. My wife is the problem because she drank and she could have made me stop. She could have. My
Mm.
roommate is the problem because he could have choked me out. He's bigger than me.
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, like I was the fucking problem.
Mm-hmm.
I was the sole problem to the reason why I was drinking. And this native man looks at me, an old native man, and I'll never forget it. He looked at me, and they called me Viking in jail, and he said, Viking, shut up. I just looked at him. I was like, what? And he's like, you created all these problems for yourself. When you accept that, you'll be okay. But until then, you're going to live exactly where I'm at, in this jail, in this cell, and you won't be able to escape your own prison. And at first, I was like, man, fuck you. Who are you? Right? Like, I think we all have that reaction. Like, who are you to talk to me like that? You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through.
Yeah.
Excuse after excuse. But literally that same day, I sat in my jail cell, and that was December 27th. And I sat in my jail cell and I said, you know, he's right. I created all these problems in my life. I've ruined every relationship that I've ever been in
Mm-hmm.
solely. I have ruined every friendship that has been going awry. I'm the reason that I relapsed, nobody else. Sure, the PTSD is not on me, but I created all these problems for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear to God, when I accepted that and I said that to myself, I got a tap on the on my cell, and I looked up and it was the corrections officer. He said, "Hey, pack your shit. We're gonna go." I said, "Where are we going?" And he said, "You're getting released." And I said,
Mm.
"What do you mean?" He was like, "Your bail got posted an hour ago." And he was like, "We're waiting on electronic monitoring to come." And now I enter into recovery. I claim my willing sobriety date as December 27th, 2019. And because that's the day that I fully accepted that I was the problem and that the only way to fix things was me. I
Mm.
couldn't put my recovery on anybody else. I couldn't look anybody else in the face and say, you created these problems for me. No, I created all my problems. And
Mm-hmm.
so that day is the day that I recognize as my sobriety date.
Did it feel like a weight came on or that a weight came off?
Oh no, it came on. It
On.
came on. Bec
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I entered into a therapeutic court, which is a drug court or a mental health court. And when I did that, I did it under the understanding that if I completed this program, my record would be expunged. But if I didn't, I would go back to jail. And it's not that I didn't want to go back to jail. I wanted to get sober for myself because all these other times that I got sober, it was for other people, and I
Mm-hmm.
failed. This time, if I got sober for myself, nothing on this earth could make me relapse. And I was
Mm-hmm.
sure, and I said this to the judge that presided over the mental health court or the drug court. I said, if I don't get sober and I don't maintain this, the next time I go out is the last time, very last time. I'm gonna drink myself to fucking death.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been sober for coming up on 4 years in December, and this is the best decision I've ever made in my life.
Tell us about your first year. Like, did you go to meetings? Did you see a therapist?
Yep. So I was mandated by a judge to do a whole ton of things. UAs, obviously. You had to do UAs to make sure that you weren't drinking or doing drugs.
Piss
And
tests.
then I had to, yeah, piss test. And then I had to do monthly meetings with my probation officer to make sure that I was on track. And then I was mandated to go to 3 AA meetings a week, and I ended up going every day because I needed it, and I knew that I needed it, and it wasn't mandated. I did it on my own accord. I had a bunch of classes that I participated in that were veteran operated, veteran owned. So the VA put on all these classes, and so I received
Hmm.
services through them. And the great thing was, like, I was going through these classes and through my therapeutic court with all veterans, so I could relate to the vets, and I have a better understanding of the way that veterans think and the way that we operate. So it was very beneficial to me. There's a class that I took called Moral Reconation Therapy, absolutely saved my life. And it made me look at all these problems that I created in my life and take accountability for them, and then
Hmm.
create goals for myself and create a life plan and work on mending the shitty or the relationships that I was the piece of shit in. And just becoming this a better version of who I was. I was doing individual counseling where I was talking about the darkest parts of me and being honest. And that's that ruthless honesty. And it hurt, right? Because like I for one time was not lying to myself, and I wasn't lying to anybody else, and I wasn't
Hmm.
saying I'm fine, right? Because the root of I'm fine is there's something really fucking wrong with me. And
Yeah.
yeah, and so I took accountability and honesty and approach to that. And I went into marriage counseling and all these other things with the goal of maintaining that sobriety. And that
Hmm.
first year was rough, but it gave me all the tools and the skills that I needed.
So I'm interested to know because I haven't had your experiences. I haven't seen active combat or anything like that. What did the therapy look like around the PTSD for you? What stood out about that? Because you can go to a 12-step meeting, and there's people at that 12-step meeting that will say, oh, the 12 steps can help you with anything, and maybe that's true to some people. I don't know. Who am I to say? But what
Yeah.
worked for you to get past the? I mean, for myself, I mean, I've been through some traumatic things. I get the flashbacks. I make up scenarios in my head that are violent. And I do these things, right? I've been in gunfights. I've never shot a gun at anyone. I've been in 100 gunfights in my head, right? So.
Yeah.
And you're shaking your head like, yeah, I get it, right? So, tell me,
Yes.
how did you get past that?
So I was doing all these different forms of therapy, and talk therapy is great for me, but I was doing all these different forms of therapy where I was trying meditation and I couldn't keep my mind settled. I was doing
Mm.
all kinds of stuff. And finally I got to the point where I looked at the counselor and I said, "You're not offering it, but I'm asking how in the fuck do I get past this?" And he said, "Well, we got different modalities that we can use. We use the MDR." And I said, "I don't know what that is, but that sounds weird. I'm not going to do it."
Let's check it out.
Yeah, yeah, no, but he said, "I'm going to have you do trauma induced therapy." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he's like, "You're going to recount a specific situation that hurts, and you're going to write about it until it doesn't hurt. And you're going to walk through those emotions, and you're going to feel the emotions because you've been running from your emotions your whole life." And I was like, "I don't like you right now, friend," but I did it, right?
Yeah.
Um, I was much a person where I ran away from my emotions and my feelings, and I masked it, whether it be in activities or drinking or smoking. Like, it didn't matter. I ran from it. So I had this piece of paper, I had this journal that I would write in, and first it was like a brief synopsis where it was like, "This is what happened." And I was like, "This is dumb. It's not going to help me." And
Yeah.
it was like the next phase was, "You're going to write the full account of what happened. Don't miss any details."
Like
So
the
I wrote that
smells, the
down.
sights, the
Yep,
temperature, the everything.
yep, yep.
Okay.
And I wrote that down, and I had to read it to him, and then I had to write it down 5 more times. And every single time I remembered something more, right? Because in PTSD, we sometimes forget things, but we oftentimes remember a lot of the details. We just have to go through the the repetition of it. So I was going through the repetition of the certain event. And then I got to the point where he said, "All right, you're going to write this again, but you're going to fill in the feeling and the emotion attached to it."
Mhm.
And I don't want to share that with you. He's like, dude, if you want to work past this, you have to. You got to share it because this is the first step to you being able to share with other people. If you can't trust me, how can you trust other people? I'm your counselor. I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
fair enough. You give a good point. So I did it, and I did it 5 more times, and there was more emotions and more feelings that came. But really, what that was doing was that was me working around the triggers, right? Because a lot of the things in that scenario triggered me. Driving down the road as a passenger and hitting a pothole was terrible. Absolutely terrible. Scared the
Why is
dog
that?
shit out of me. IED. I was out on my second deployment. My truck hit an IED, and right before that, we hit a pothole. And
Okay.
so it scared the shit out of me. I didn't trust people driving, so I'd much rather drive. But there were situations where I couldn't.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of situations in my life that triggered me. And so that taught me to work around the triggers. And if I alleviated the stress from the trigger, then I could alleviate the stress from any situation in my life. And I still use that to this day. And it was like super beneficial for me.
Mhm. So, talk to us a little bit about moving through your recovery. Now, did your triggers and the trauma that you experienced and the flashbacks or whatever came up, did that stop driving you to drink when you had made the decision to stop drinking?
That ultimately did. I wanted, I guess, like a great alcoholic and addict. I just did everything all at once, right? I was like, I'm gonna quit drinking. I'm gonna go into
Quit
my mental health.
smoking. Were you going to be an
Literally
addictions
quit.
counselor?
No, actually, I wasn't. I didn't know
That's
what I
weird.
wanted to do. Yeah, I know. I know a lot of people that are like that.
Yeah,
No, I
most
just
people
didn't
like
know
they
what I.
get sober and they want to be an addictions counselor right away.
Oh, yeah, I know. I see that a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I wanted to do, to be honest. After I graduated my program, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and then one of my counselors approached me and said, "Hey, you'd be great peer support." And I was like, "What is that?" And he's like, "I don't know." I said, "Well, how are you going to tell me I would
Sounds
be great
smart.
peer support
Yeah.
and I don't know, and you don't know what it is?" And he said,
Uh-huh.
"I don't know what it is, but here's a point of contact for you." And I went to that class, and that was I got a key to a door that I didn't know it existed, and it was awesome.
Cool, man. Um, so do you work with people now that are in recovery from
I do.
PTSD?
Uh, now, I work with veterans that are in the same situation that I was in, right?
Okay.
So for Veterans Therapeutic Court, I work with veterans that are still living in Alaska. I don't any longer live in Alaska, but I work with them. I do Zoom meetings every Wednesday night, and we talk about a topic driven conversation, whether it be about substance or whether it be about mental health. We talk about it all, or a general check-in, right? Because it's important to be able to come and talk about like how our day's going, right? And to
Mm-hmm.
be able to vocalize that, or how our week's going, because sometimes we have these astounding weeks, these great weeks, and just that one day fucked it all up for us, right? And
One
it
minute.
drives us to want to. 1 minute could
One
drive us
thought,
to want to
man.
drink again.
And for me, like, and like I've had, like I've already mentioned my own experiences, and there was a time in my life, and even not that long ago, where I could have one thought about something that happened back in the day, and it would ruin my whole week.
I'm telling you, I had one of those days Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
I went and I ordered a sandwich and I didn't get the right sandwich and I let it ruin my day.
What?
I fucking and it was
Did you
just
still eat
something
the
that you
sandwich?
I did.
Was it good?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, I let it ruin half my day. Okay, realistically, it
Okay,
didn't ruin
because
the
it
whole
was
day.
still good.
It was still good, you know.
Yeah.
I ordered a sausage, egg, and cheese muffin, and I got a bacon, egg, and cheese muffin, and I was like, I didn't want bacon. Look, I'm
Oh
not.
no.
I really wanted sausage, right? And like I got so in my head about it,
Yeah.
and I was just so fucking mad, and
Yeah.
I just let it affect the rest of my day. Well, most of my day.
Hmm. So we're coming to the end. Did we hit everything you wanted to hit?
Pretty much, except for the fact, I had I one of the things that I noticed, and this is something that I've noticed very recently, when you get into early recovery and you're learning all these tools and these skills, they teach you these tools and the skills in a perfect world scenario where
Hmm. Yes.
You have all these safety nets and you have all these buffers. And if something were to go wrong or go awry, you have these buffers, but they don't teach you about what happens when your life goes to shit and the only thing that you have is your recovery. And I had one of those situations happen this past December, and I can't tell you how many people came to me and were like, just don't drink, just don't drink. And I said, that hasn't been a thought on my brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing this for the other person. I'm doing this for me because if
Mm-hmm.
I don't do this for me, guys, I'm gonna fucking die here in about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I did it for myself, and it was amazing. You know, I relocated. I changed what I was doing. I changed the people that I surrounded myself with. I changed everything about my scenario, and it's opened up doors for me that I didn't think were possible. And I my recovery means the world to me now. I put my recovery before anything. I put my recovery before my relationships. I put my recovery before my daughter. And I know that people that don't understand that might look at it and be like, "You're a shitty human being." But I put my recovery
Yeah.
before all that because if I don't have my recovery, I don't have none of that
Yeah.
at all.
And none of that has you.
No, 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 no.
Mm-hmm.
You know what the craziest thing is? Last year, my daughter got to see me sober for the first time,
You're what
and
now? Sorry,
she's
what?
10 years old. My daughter got to see me sober for the first time 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Or not 10 years ago, sorry. She's 10 years old and she's seen me sober for the first time last year. And it was the most amazing situation that I could have been put in because all the stars aligned to be able to see her because I lived in Alaska, she lived in Tennessee, and the stars aligned where things worked out perfectly. And for the first time, she seen me sober, really the best version of myself. And her mother and her stepfather see me sober, and so now they have a better faith and confidence in me as a human being and as a father where I don't have to be like, hey, look, guys, sorry, I missed this visit because I was too shit faced. Or
Mm-hmm.
sorry, guys, I couldn't pay my child support because I spent it all on alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I guess that's it. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. That was a great talk. I appreciate you sharing your experience and strength and hope with us all. One last thing. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to jump in real quick and say thank you for your service.
Yes.
Thank you for your support.
If there's someone out there tonight that might be going through what you went through, you got nowhere else to turn, what would you say to them?
Get help. It doesn't matter where it's from. Get help. Pick up that phone. That phone is 5,000 pounds when we're in trouble. And when we
Mm,
have a situation that is sometimes greater than us, pick up that phone, call somebody. You can call me, I don't care. You can find me anywhere. I mean, realistically, but you call somebody that you trust, that you know has your best interest at heart, that's not going to feed you a lot of shit. That's going to be straight up and be honest with you, right? Because we can all justify our actions, but if other people justify it for us, then we're going to continue to feel justified.
yeah.
Get help.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We'll let you go. Take care, my friend.
Bye.
All right. If you got something out of tonight's show, please give that like button a click. If you are not yet subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. We go live every Friday morning, every Sunday evening, right here on YouTube. You can check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. That's it for this episode. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Say, this is Hard Knocks.